Joining me now, Fox News contributor Lisa Booth and opinion host at The Hill and host of the Realignment podcast. For the first time, we're very excited to welcome Saagar Enjeti. All right, Lisa, let's start with the election part of that conversation. Are you ready yet to shut up and move on?
No, I'm not, because we have an election with a massive volume of mail-in ballots that made it easier to cheat than ever before at a time when half of the country is convinced that President Trump is Hitler. So I have a lot of questions about that, particularly when you look at races like New York 22 that still has yet to be called. You have a district there that is used to seeing 7,000 absentee ballots, but saw 60,000 ballots this election cycle. And we've seen numerous mistakes that have been made in the accounting and tabulation as a result of that. So no, I'm not willing to accept the results of the election at this current moment. But you had mentioned Orwell, Steve, and we're at a really difficult juncture as a country because the left largely controls the narrative. You have the media and the left pushing the exact same narrative, and then big tech coming in, as you pointed out, censoring and suppressing any opinion that runs counter of that narrative. And it all goes in one direction. YouTube just the other day released a policy where they're going to remove content for anyone who says anything questioning or certain questions or raising doubts about the 2020 election. However, it's perfectly fine to say that Russia stole the 2016 election.
Exactly. It's exactly right. Saagar, you know, I'm one of the reasons I'm so excited to welcome you to the show is, like, you've been a leading voice for the kind of conservative populism that I think a lot of us, and certainly I know our audience, wants to see, and that President Trump has been moving forward in many policy directions. It seems to me that when you hear what Lisa's just said, the kind of things I laid out and some of the potential solutions, there's a central theme here that we need to really understand deeply, and that is the concentration of power. The power is concentrated in this country in too few hands. Wherever you look at, whether that's government, whether that's business, the media, control of the conversation, as Lisa just outlined, it's the concentration of power. And we've got to kind of really focus, I think, for the long term in blowing that apart in all these different areas.
No, you're exactly right, Steve. And thank you so much for those kind words. You're a leader in this movement as well. And thank you for welcoming me here on the show. The biggest problem we have, whether it be on the election, whether it be on Capitol, whether it be on so much, why do 100 million Americans not trust the results of this election? It's largely because the interlocutors and the system that we have currently has made it so that they have lied to them. They have robbed them blind. They're trying to re-educate them day after day. And now you see, you know, the wanted new regime coming in, which is essentially propagating the same swampish, disgusting behavior that you talked about. I cannot help but point to the example that Joe Biden, two of the people he's put forward for defense secretary and for secretary of state, are both advisors to a hedge fund, which is set to make hundreds of millions of dollars off of this administration, off of the very opportunities that those people are supposed to go in and create for them. It is open and outright. I mean, it's legal, but it is corruption. By any definition, it is a briefcase handful of cash, and it's something that they will never discuss. Look just today with NBC News reporting about Hunter Biden receiving $400,000 from Burisma. I mean, where was this in 2018 during the impeachment scandal? Nothing. It's completely absent. These people woke up, and to Lisa's point on YouTube, I mean, you can't post a video about the election, but Twitter is going to ban stories about Hunter Biden's corruption, which we now know has been being investigated for 2 years in the Justice Department. It's just insane hypocrisy everywhere you look. And as you say, it is concentrated power in its form, which is perpetuating all of these systems.
Exactly right. And as you lay it out there, it's so infuriating, you know, and Lisa, you feel the same way, I know. Let's just talk about one specific thing, aspect of this. I think the reason, as Saagar just said, the Hunter Biden story and the Biden family corruption that we've laid out on this show as well is such a good example of the business model of the swamp, how they operate, the revolving door, the cashing in on government roles. It seems to me that making sure that investigation continues in the form of a special counsel or whatever you want to call it, I think that's really important, because I know people say, well, that's no good because it'll get in the fishing expedition and all sorts of other stuff will be unearthed. Great. That's what we want to do. We want to make sure that this is all exposed. What do you think of that?
Well, Steve, I agree with you, but we've also heard people say that Joe Biden had no involvement, nothing to see there. That's just not true. I mean, even go back to 2013 when Joe Biden took Hunter Biden on that official trip to China on Air Force Two, met with one of Hunter Biden's business partners there, and then no less than 2 weeks later, he got $1 billion private equity deal with ties to China. Or look at the fact that one of Hunter Biden's emails show a Burisma official thanking Hunter for introducing him to his dad while Joe Biden was the vice president, less than a year before he got that top prosecutor fired in Ukraine who was investigating Burisma. And lastly, we have both Tony Bobulinski and Hunter Biden's emails showing that Joe Biden was the big guy who was set to get 10% of a cut with a deal with a Chinese energy company. So I'm sorry, you cannot collectively look at that information and say that Joe Biden was not involved. I don't know the extent. I don't know if he was the recipient, if he actually made money from it, but he certainly was involved to some extent. So if that's where the media should focus, in my opinion, right now.
Yeah, and we are absolutely right. We'll have to leave it there for the moment. We'll come back to it later on at the end, towards the end of the show, the same issues. But remember, we already know that Joe Biden lied about all this, the things he said about not discussing it and so on. Not true. I mean, that's established already from what we already know. All right, coming up.